My name is Jason T. Ingram. I go by the artist name of Fake Zappa. I am proudly out of the closet, and as not only a LGBTQ person, but as mentally disabled. And my favorite shows on TV is Young Sheldon, and of course Big Bang Theory, which I've been a fan of for about the last 6 years. And the first time I saw Sheldon Cooper on that show, I thought he was a guest because he seemed to hog the screen. He was just larger than life. And I thought, oh my God, this character must come in and out of the show every once in a while, because I don't know how anybody could stand watching Sheldon Cooper every single episode. And then I watched another episode. I thought, oh, he's one of the two main characters of the whole show. And in fact, so much of it revolves around him. And yeah, he's most of the comic relief. You know, they have the kind of Merry and Pippin characters, of course, Wallowitz and Koothrappali. But the main comic of the show is Sheldon Cooper. And the way they portrayed him as in the first several seasons was somebody who didn't necessarily suffer, but who made everybody else suffer. And they would insult him as a result. And it was this common thing. And I didn't like that. And then they started having episodes in the last 5 years or so, one of them in particular, where he's so scared of change. And that's so much a part of our lives as mentally disabled people, is we need to feel safe, we need to feel comfortable, and having a routine, having a safe place that's the same every day, having routines is very important to mentally disabled people. And they've portrayed that in that character really well. But when, I think it was when Penny was moving in or something like that, where there was some changes, major changes in the living situation, Sheldon got on a train, and he took the train, didn't even get off of the train. He took it all around the country. Well, I guess he had to get on the other trains. Yeah, I don't think he even left any of the train stations. And, you know, his observations were about ketchup and mustard and what he saw out the window. You know? And it just reminded me so much of myself, of when I'm scared, I run away just because, you know, it's either that or get into self-harm, because you just simply cannot stay in the same environment if you don't feel safe. And that's something a lot of people can't relate to. So there is some understanding about mentally disabled people in the writers of this show. And I really honor Jim Parsons, because, I mean, he was so instrumental in getting Young Sheldon. That show is beautiful. It's a sitcom without the laugh track, without the studio. It's a lot more like the show Scrubs or MASH, where it's a full production with lots of locations. And it's a beautiful show with beautiful music, beautiful acting. The young characters and the old characters are matched up so well. I mean, even Georgie was just like amazing how they casted young Georgie and old Georgie as the Dr. Tire guy. I mean, they just did an amazing job at that, and especially the mom. She is like the best the best depiction of a fundy mother, of a Christian fundamentalist mom, because I've been around a lot of church ladies, because I spent 12 years in fundy circles. And I fell in love with these people. And she just talks like I pray a hedge of protection. I mean, where the fuck did the hedge come from, you know? But they say these things, and they've said them for generations. They probably heard it on Oral Roberts or something years ago, and it just becomes a part of their culture. And there's a lot of things that are based on the Bible, and there's a lot of things that they think are based on the Bible that just become like, you know, like a misquotation of scripture, you know, like God helps those who helps themselves, and all that kind of culture. And what it's like to be a talented and gifted and, you know, mentally disabled in an environment like that is interesting. How these people are strong as compared to educated people, and they can handle folks that have high maintenance issues, because people of faith are typically people that have a lot of inner strength in them. And I've noticed that being a very low functioning person and being around people of faith, and how they were able to tolerate my mental illness really well. Something I really like also about Jim Parsons is that here he's a gay man playing a straight man. Even though he's pretty much an asexual character, he still is a heterosexual oriented character. And I think his disability is some form of Asperger's, somewhere on the autism spectrum, something like that. I don't relate to that quite as much because I don't really have a technical developmental disorder, although I never developed socially like the Sheldon character. And it shows how he wasn't able to develop socially and have a regular upbringing, although his siblings had that privilege because of their functioning level and stuff like that. And in fact, his sister, which is great, is that she developed socially very early, was very, very attentive at that. It just reminded me of my sister. She developed socially. She could figure out anybody, what was going on with them. And then, of course, you got Georgie, who is just typical dude. And me being raised in the 80s and, being exposed to those old computers and those old TV shows, I love period pieces. And it's really cool to see a period piece that a Gen X guy like me could relate to. But anyways, Jim Parsons, I don't know how much money he fronted for this show, but, it was well spent. And it's very rare that I see a kind of Hollywood portrayal of somebody like me. Especially like Will and Grace, where you got a straight guy playing a gay guy. And I look at that and I think, I cannot relate to that kind of gay. That's Hollywood gay. And and I think it's Eric McCormick, the poor guy. He's been typecast. He's tried to break out of that role, and I don't know if he's ever succeeded at it. But anyways, Jim Parsons also did a show called Special. There's a guy named Ryan O'Connell, I forget his name. And it's such a great portrayal of being gay and disabled, and Jim Parsons had a hand in that. And it was a really fun show, and I did a whole nother discussion on that as well. That's like 30 minutes of me talking about, hi honey, my partner's home from church. It's Easter Sunday, and so I thought I would do a couple videos today about my life and about the media and things that I like about the media. Most of the time when the media portrays a mentally disabled person or a gay person, I'm like, I cannot relate. Especially if they portray a gay mentally ill person, which they rarely do. And that's why I like that show Special, even though it's really dorky, it's still, they cover some hard issues and they do it well. And thank you, Jim Parsons, for having your finger on it. And so things about Young Sheldon that I can relate to is his thing about germs, his thing about, a dog licking his face, things that are really important to him as far as like everything being in a certain order, but yet I'm being okay if like all these important things fall apart, like him dressing up as Madame Curie. It didn't seem to bother him, but his brother was like trying to actually protect him and say, don't wear that costume because you're going to be made fun of some more. They were trying to protect him, but he didn't see it that way. And so he does all these things, or his priorities are totally way off. He doesn't understand how his different reality affects other people. And at the same time, there's a lot of people that really do need to acknowledge that he's in a different reality, and that reality isn't wrong. That's his reality. And there could be some good things about it. Maybe he sees some things like, for instance, like how to recycle a rocket booster. Here's this 10-year-old kid and he's got this solution to it, and well, I mean, although it's a fictional character, still though, there are some kids that had these brilliant ideas, and if we just listen to them, then maybe we could save the world. But here's the thing, is that we look at somebody and we think, okay, this kid, he has to have the same meals, like every week he has to have this certain kind of meal, like Thai food or like spaghetti with hot dogs cut up in it or something, and he's just meticulous and he's crazy. Why should we listen to a crazy person? And then it turns out that if a crazy person is recognized, then everybody will listen to him. But the thing is to get a crazy person to be recognized is really hard. The thing that young Sheldon had, though, is that he was recognized and folks did accommodate him. Like there were colleges that wanted, he was wanted for his gifts. And that's something that was sad when I was growing up, because I was required to be high functioning and gifted. But when you're gifted and low functioning, then it's like, okay, you're on your own unless you're doing what we want to do, because you're this sort of tool. It's like, oh, he's low functioning. He can't function unless we take care of him. And as long as we're taking care of him, he's going to do what we want him to do. And that's the way my career has been. And that's why, one of the reasons why it's never got off the ground. And so that's something I wish they'd acknowledge, is that there's a lot of gifted people that are just kind of kept a secret because, well, they have this gift, but it's ours and we're going to keep it for ourselves, and we're not going to allow him to be recognized and get the attention that he deserves based on his contribution and based on the amount of suffering that he has because of his dysfunction. So that would be nice if they had another character just like Sheldon who was totally ignored for his abilities. Now, it's amazing that a fundy mom like Mrs. Cooper would, I mean, she just loves that kid. And I think that's a great way of portraying Christians, that the media seems to portray Christians as being hypocrites. They're not loving. They preach love, but they practice judgment. They preach, mercy, but they're unmerciful, which has been kind of the norm of my Christian experience, which a lot of church people are hypocrites, but they portray ones that are actually pretty darn good. And I think that's really cool. I love the way they portray the pastor. In fact, the way they portray mental illness, like for instance, like, young Sheldon and his brother licks the knife of the jam. He's getting a little can of jam or jelly or something, and he puts it back in there. And young Sheldon, he just went through this horrible ordeal, and that was nothing compared to the fact that his brother licked a utensil and put it back in there. Oh no, because it's going to be in the fridge and there's going to be his germs on there, and I'm not going to touch it. And I got to remember that is the jar of jam that I don't eat, and it's going to be stuck in his head, and he's going to worry about it unless he throws it away or something like that. That's a huge, important thing for him. And so they portrayed that very well. And they also portrayed, the fact that it was just a big nuisance to people. And so that's one of the things that I see about mentally disabled people, is that, and this is a little something I'm cynically calling, I'm sorry my suffering is such an inconvenience to you. Because it is an inconvenience for people, and that's all they want to look at is, well, this is inconvenient for me to make an exception because this person's scared of germs, and being scared of germs, well, that's just stupid. But if they would understand this person suffers with anxiety and it's in their head and they can't help it and they're doing their best at it, then maybe they would suffer a little less. They would feel more safe. And here's the thing, and this is for free. Anybody here that might be around people that suffer from germ phobia disorders and stuff like that? My germ phobia and my germ conscious and all that kind of stuff is inconsistent. And because it's inconsistent, people think I can just be cured about it and turn it off whenever I want to. But it's inconsistent with me feeling safe and me feeling unsafe. And so the way they portrayed Mrs. Cooper as making her son feel safe in a lot of environments is amazing, because I wish I had that kind of upbringing. The way that my illness was dealt with was being hit with things that continually made me feel unsafe. Like, I have to do this, I have to act this way, I have to talk this way. That makes me feel more unsafe. That would get me more symptomatic and more trauma. And so, there are definitely things that the Cooper family could have done to help their son more. But it's a great example of Christians raising a disabled kid, especially with an invisible disability like his. And so again, I want to say hats off to Jim Parsons and the crew, and especially the Big Bang Theory of the last several seasons of how they've portrayed a mentally disabled character in a way that really shows that he's not making everybody suffer as much as the fact that what's more important, he is suffering. And something else too that I think is, I don't know if it's really realistic, but the fact that Sheldon Cooper does have friends, that goes into fantasy, I think. But the fact that a lot of scientists have developmental disabilities and they're around people with developmental disabilities because of the talented and gifted type folks are usually paired with that, is that I think the scientific community, without really knowing much about it, I think they would be a little more tolerant and a little more able to work with folks with developmental disabilities and other disorders like that too. But I can relate to developmental disabilities, and like I said, just the fact that I didn't develop socially because of different reasons, because of my environment as well, but because of my disorders, and as a result of my disorders being made feel unsafe, which caused more disorders, which enabled me to not develop socially. And so somebody can not necessarily be born on the autism spectrum and be the only ones that don't develop in every way. There's a lot of people that don't develop as adults because of their environment, or because their resources are constantly being drained by parents and by their environment, to where they're in survival mode all the time. And they have to put all this emphasis on, I have to survive and I have to cope with a dysfunctional family instead of learning how to relate to people. And so folks on the autism spectrum, they have often both of that too. You got people that don't see them as suffering. This kid is making everybody suffer. He wants all this attention. And after a while, folks start to resent that, especially caregivers and folks like that. And then it becomes a character flaw. Once people get afraid of somebody who's got behavioral issues, they get afraid of that. But that's a whole nother story. I talked a little bit about that, and when I was talking about the Netflix show called Special, which is also uploaded around the same time I'm doing this. But hey, I'm going to get off, and maybe in a year or so, I will talk about Young Sheldon and adult Sheldon Cooper, and how mental illness is portrayed in the media positively and negatively, realistically and unrealistically. And again, I like to say to, oh gosh, I can't remember that. Anyways, Jim Parsons and the guy that writes all those funny things at the end of Lori, Chuck Lorre, and that they've done a better job of just about anybody I've ever seen in the media to portray them, except for shows like A Beautiful Mind, like movies, and of course Love and Mercy, the story of Brian Wilson, which if you're wanting to learn about this stuff, that's the movie to watch. So anyways, thank you for your time. fakezappa.com, and I should have some more stuff about this later.